Emotional pressure. Our emotion has some type of contributing factor to whatever it is we're dealing with, but it doesn't stop there. Your emotions begin to play things in your mind that cause you to do, say, and think things you don't truly mean. Understanding the two foundations of your emotional pressure is key. The two foundations are: you set the boundary of emotional pressure you can withstand when it comes to your emotions. You are walking outside of your destiny.
Don't feel nobody, I'm rocking, feel God. Can't rob with you cause I ain't feeling God. I made a bet Jesus could be the odds. He can shine through me cause I'm the son of God.
Yo, welcome to the Question Mindset Podcast with your host, Olivier J. Darcisse. We're here with another episode, with another topic, and it's truly a blessing to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you guys. And for my new listeners and watchers out there, the Question Mindset Podcast is a platform where I myself, or with a guest, come to give you and provide you deep understanding on topics and questions that help you carry yourself better in life. Be a better believer in Christ. And for my entrepreneurs out there, to help you be a better entrepreneur, to even help you and give you the advice and the tips and the tricks to run your businesses a little bit better, because we all need that. But enough of that. The topic for today that I want to talk with you about, that's been meditating on my mind for quite some time, it's called emotional pressure, right? And it's been meditating on my mind for a couple weeks now, actually, because I actually did an episode with a good brother of mine, Pastor Jude, where we talked about how to grow in intimacy with God. And one of those four things really planted the seed for this episode, because, to make the long story short, the four ways to grow in intimacy with God that we talked about, it's care, it's trust, it's acceptance, and it's emotional openness. And emotional openness, if you didn't hear from the title of the topic today, emotional pressure, emotional openness planted the seed for today's topic because the word emotion piqued my interest. Because after I did that episode with him, I thought no matter what issue, no matter what problem we have or whatever it is we're dealing with, our emotion has some type of contributing factor to whatever it is we're dealing with. But it doesn't stop there. I was even thinking about past situations that I've been in, and many of you can even attest or, can say that you've been through a scenario like this where you're just chilling, you're just vibing, but out of nowhere, you are triggered by something somebody said, did, or whatever the case may be to trigger you, and it triggers an emotion that you're most likely are struggling with, because the only way you're triggered is because you're struggling with a given emotion. And I want to move forward. I want to move forward and give you the nuggets from today, for today, but I want to take things slow. But you can attest to this. You were vibing, but you were triggered by something somebody said, did, or whatever the case may be, and it triggered something in you. And the key statement that I'm saying is emotion that you are struggling with. You can only be triggered by an emotion you are struggling with. Let me give you an example. If you never had an anger problem or an attitude problem, nobody can really trigger you to be angry. Like if they do the normal things that would trigger somebody that initially had that issue with anger or attitude, they would get triggered. But if you never struggled with that type of emotion, you wouldn't be triggered necessarily. But if, in retrospect, if you always carried a feeling of sadness or depression or whatever the case may be, and somebody triggers you in that sense to have that overwhelming sadness, you're most likely going to get triggered and fall into, this whole idea of emotional pressure that I'm bringing to you today. Because at the end of the day, and to sum up what I'm saying, to give context for our topic, is emotional pressure only comes when and for an emotion or behind an emotion that you are struggling with. You cannot be triggered by an emotion that you, for retrospect, have a high tolerance for, or have a high aptitude, or even whatever the case may be, whatever the word is. You won't feel emotional pressure if you have high tolerance to a particular emotion. And I want to dive deep to the context of emotional pressure, because there's two foundations within emotional pressure. There's the initial pressure, and then there's the trigger, which we just talked about briefly. But before we get into those two foundations, what is emotional pressure? And I have that written down over here. I always like to go to the foundational meaning whenever I'm breaking down the topic or having a conversation with you guys, because this helps me help you understand the topic for today. So emotional pressure, I have it written down right here. Emotional pressure is a state of psychological strain or stress caused by external or internal factors that creates feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, and distress. And there's two key things that I want to mention. Key words being overwhelm, anxiety, and distress. And the two things that's going to help us in the future to further understand emotional pressure is external and internal. Because external is, something somebody else said, did, or something that's outside of your control. And internal is more or less your moral makeup, everything that has to do with you. Internal is everything you. This is going to make sense as we move forward. But before we do, this is the question that I want to ask you guys. How does emotional pressure play in our lives? And like I said, again, I'm bringing this to you because we need to understand emotional pressure. We need to understand why we have low tolerance for those emotions that we have and how to overcome emotional pressure as a whole. Because emotional pressure causes us to be confined emotionally and to cause us to be sensitive to things externally, which, like I said earlier, it causes us to be triggered. It causes us to be in a state of reaction. Because what is a state of reaction? A state of reaction is where your emotions is doing the thinking for you. We all learn that it's better to be in a state of response versus a state of reaction, because a state of reaction is you feel a certain type of way, and because of those feelings you begin to have certain thoughts, you begin to play things in your mind. I would even say it's your emotions. Your emotions begin to play things in your mind that cause you to do, say, and think things you don't truly mean. And that's bad, because to be in a state of response is you need to acknowledge, what you're feeling. You need to acknowledge these things, but to not let that dictate your actions. You are entitled to feel however it is you are feeling in the moment, but you cannot let that dictate your actions. That's false. That's immoral. That's horrible. Like in Miami, Florida terms, that's grits, bro. Like at the end of the day. But I want to double back on the state of reaction, because like I said, it causes us to say or speak things verbally. It causes us to do things we don't want to do, and it causes us to think things we don't want to think because of the feelings that we are feeling. And I want to double down on mentally, because this can be very dangerous and we almost instinctively fall into it because our emotions kind of influence us in a way if we don't know how to control if we don't know how to control our emotions. The reason why I say mentally is because many times you feel a certain type of way, and because of those feelings, it causes you to cripple yourself. Cripple yourself how? Like I said, it causes us to do things and say things we don't want to say and do things we don't want to do. But the think can be the most dangerous one, which is why I want to reaffirm it, is because it causes us to think thoughts like we are not enough, or our life has no meaning or worth. It causes us to think that, oh, this is too much. I cannot endure. I can't stand it. I can't take it anymore. And it causes us to also think certain thoughts along the lines where I don't have the skills, I don't have the talent necessary to overcome the mountain that is in front of me, and I'm gonna just give up. And that give up feeling and that thought that's influenced by our emotions causes some people to take their lives. And that's why emotional pressure is a dangerous thing if we don't truly understand it. Because at the end of the day, the thoughts that these emotions and feelings give us are false. Just look at the Bible. And at the end of the day, I can't control what anybody else does with their life. I can't control what anybody else feels that they need to do. All I can say is this in regards to if you're having these types of thoughts. If you feel as if you can endure, I'm here to tell you, you can, at the end of the day, if you truly believe in God and you are with him, and that he will give you the strength that you need, that you feel you don't possess yourself. Because at the end of the day, and I love saying at the end of the day because it further reaffirms and puts the passion that I have behind what I'm saying. Because look at Jesus. Jesus endured the worst kind of torture man can endure. And if he can endure that, if you believe in him, if you know he gives you strength, if you know he provides for you, if you know he is there for you, how much more can you endure in this life? Nothing that we are going through can surpass what Jesus endured in that moment. And he chose to endure that. So at the end of the day, you have to make that choice to endure for yourself. Don't fall and don't succumb to the thoughts these feelings are trying to insinuate on yourself, trying to force onto you. You can endure, and not just you being able to endure. If you feel as if your life has no worth, your life has no meaning, bro, that is false on top of that, because God handpicked you out of everybody else to be born from your mother and father, because he feels that no matter what you go through, you will be able to endure those things. You will be able to find a way to move past the problems, the trials, the tribulations, if you have him. And key word is if you have him. If you don't have God, if you don't have Jesus, of course you feel as if you don't have strength when things get too hard. Of course you feel like my life has no meaning. My life gives you Of course you feel your life has no meaning. Your life has no work if you don't have Jesus, because Jesus gives purpose to our pains. Jesus gives purpose to our trials. Jesus gives purpose to our tribulations, because it's all in the lines to help us and build us to be the person that he called us to be, to operate in the will that he has for us. And if you don't understand Jesus, if you don't understand God, I implore you, what's the word? I implore you, I hope, I pray that you find a ministry that helps you understand Jesus, that helps you understand God, because it's a ministry with the mission. It's a ministry that has a vision and mission that'll help you understand God, understand Jesus, and move past that step of salvation into purpose, into walking in the will God has for you. Because that's what my ministry did for me, the ministry that I go to, the Worldwide Kingdom Ministry with my papa, my spiritual father, Prophet Dr. Kervin Didone. Without him, without the ministry, without his wife, Prophetess Melissa C. Didone, without all the people, without that environment, I wouldn't be here today. And I suggest come to a church like mine's, find a ministry like mine's, or find a ministry out there that can help teach you Jesus, that can help teach you God, that can help teach you the things of the Bible, so you can have Jesus, you can have God, and you can be able to see that your life has meaning, see that your life has worth, see that you can be able to endure. And I want to even attack the last thought in all this, because if you feel as if you don't have the skills necessary, if you don't have the talents necessary to overcome whatever mountain, whatever Goliath, or whatever thing that's in your way, I'm here to tell you can. You can. Point blank, you can. Because the Bible is there to give you the things necessary, the wisdom, the practical knowledge that can be implemented in our day-to-day life, in our relationships, finance, business, whatever the case may be, to give you the tools and resources to overcome that mountain, to overcome that Goliath, to overcome all these things, because it's right there. You feel as if God is not talking to you, God is not answering your question, God is not heeding to your prayers. It's because he already answered it. He already answered it with the things that's in the Bible. And if you don't read the Bible, if you don't truly understand past the surface level things, you will feel as if you don't have the skills, you don't have the talents to overcome your Goliath or to overcome the mountain that's in front of you. It's all there for you. And I want to double down on the mental aspect that we struggle with when it comes to being in a state of reaction, because you see all the things that I just said, people struggle with those same three thoughts, and even more beyond those three thoughts, because emotional pressure confines us so horribly. It confines us emotionally, and it causes us to be triggered and to be at the beck and call, or to have things that are external bend us and mold us to do their will, to move in a certain way, because they have that power, that control over us. And that is why understanding the two foundations of emotional pressure is key. The two foundations are, we said earlier, are the initial pressure and triggering. The initial pressure are as such, and I said earlier, the two factors within the definition of emotional pressure: external and internal. Internal are the things that causes us to have that internal pressure, or that confined boundary, because of one reason: lack of maturity. Point blank. Because at the end of the day, and I have that written down right here, you set the boundary of pressure you can withstand by your own actions. No one can build your emotional tolerance but yourself, but you, but your actions, but the things you do. That's why I said that one of the two things from the core definition of emotional pressure is internal, is caused by your own actions because of your lack of maturity. What is, or how does having a lack of maturity causes you to, go through the initial conflict, so to say, when it comes to emotional pressure? Lack of maturity causes you to miss so much lessons in every aspect of your life, because all you see is yourself, all you see is your own perspective, and not the true context of the situation. Let me give you an example from the anger or attitude emotion that we talked about earlier. You have attitude, you have an anger problem because all you see is yourself, all you see is your perspective, all you see is things being done in your way. And the moment somebody's not at your beck and call to achieve these things, you have an attitude, you have an anger problem. Whatever the case may be, when it comes to seeing things from your own perspective and not the true context of the situation, when dealing with and interacting with other people, that's when that anger and everything begins to boil up. And lack of maturity can play in this same type of context with any type of emotion: sadness, frustration, all these things, all these other emotions, because all you see is yourself, all you see is your own perspective. And to be real, I had to learn the same thing when it comes to lack of maturity. And bless God for a good brother of mine, Pastor Richard at the Worldwide Kingdom Ministry, because he's been guiding me when it comes to maturity. And the first initial conversation that we had, where he kind of shed light on this, where he said, you have a maturity issue. I'm speaking to myself. I have a maturity issue because I took things too personally. You take things personally because you don't see the true context of the situation. You don't see how somebody is trying to guide you. You don't see how somebody's trying to correct you. You don't see how somebody is trying to, and it may not even be that person. It may be God influencing that person to do these things so you can see the lesson within the true context of the situation. But like I said earlier, if you have a lack of maturity, you only see yourself, you only see your perspective, you only see how you would talk to somebody. And because what they're doing to you is outside of that vision that you have, you begin to take things personally. You begin to have attitude. You begin to move in a certain type of way because you have yet to understand the flow of not taking things personally and seeing the true context of the situation. The only way to get out of this, to get out of the cycle of lack of maturity, is simple. It's to grow your maturity. As you grow in maturity, you will begin to see yourself learn faster as you get into new situations, new circumstances that you've never been in, because now you see things from the perspective of the true context of the situation and not your own personal perspective, your own personal viewpoint. Because once you view it from that perspective, you're not moving in a mature fashion. And that is why you see that even people who are older don't have maturity, because they continue to see things from their own perspective and not the true perspective of the initial context of the situation. Somebody can be 50, 60, 45, but because they only see their own viewpoints, their own perspective, they move constantly in a triggered state because they have no maturity, and they draw that confinement of of whatever they draw that line of confinement with whatever emotion they are dealing with, whether it be sadness, whether it be anger, whether it be frustration, whether it be embarrassment, whatever the case may be. And you might be asking yourself, how can I grow my maturity, or how can I grow when it comes to maturity? You can't schedule it. My spiritual father said this one time: you can't schedule growth, it just happens. So growth when it comes to maturity has to happen by way of new experiences, by you going out there, you going out in life and doing things, interacting with people, interacting with all these things, but being conscious to not be in a state of reaction because of the emotions you are struggling with, and be in a state of response where, yes, you feel these emotions, but you don't take things personally. You don't see it from just your perspective, and you see it from the true perspective of the situation. And of course, you're going to make mistakes, but this is not saying for you to go out there and to make mistakes on purpose. That's two different things. Two different things, hands down. But if you want to fast forward your growth, you can't schedule growth, but you can fast forward your growth by one of three things, or one of four things. One, by a mentor, by a brother, by a teacher, or by somebody that visibly and mentally walks as if they have maturity. And of course, the closer connection you have with the person, the more you'll be able to receive when it comes to learning lessons and learning things from that person. Because look at this, my spiritual father even said this too as well, where he says somebody can go through 21 years of trials and tribulation that cause them to grow their maturity to a certain level, keeping it within the constraints of this topic, growing their maturity to a certain level. They can turn around and teach you the things they learned and talk to you about the trials and tribulations they went through. So now you learn through them without having to go through the experiences they did. So when you see them, you'll walk in maturity, you would walk in wisdom, you would walk in knowledge, you would walk in from a perspective of you already knowing and understanding how to deal with it. So that puts you 21 years in the future, relatively speaking. But at the end of the day, there will still be situations and circumstances that you have yet to go through. So just because you're 21 years in the future doesn't mean you are almighty, all-seeing, somebody with all wisdom. No, you're still you still have to come from you still have to come from a place of humility where it's as if you don't know better, but you're still learning better, even though you could be at a place compared to somebody else where you know a lot. But that's one way to fast track your growth when it comes to maturity. But at the end of the day, it just happens. And this leads me to the second reason we go through the initial pressure caused by our own actions, caused by things internally. And that's because of pride and entitlement. I feel as if pride and entitlement are supporting factors to someone that walks as if they have no maturity, or as if they lack maturity. Because what do we say about lack of maturity? You see things from your own perspective. You see things from your own point of view without looking at the true context of the situation. Pride and entitlement reinforces that, because look at pride. What is pride? Pride is when you move as if you are trying to preserve your own dignity. Why? Because you feel as if you are ashamed or you are embarrassed because you made a mistake, and that causes you to be ignorant towards it, or to not even acknowledge it, or even ignore that it even happened. But that's a false way to look at it. And entitlement, it's supporting to pride and supporting to somebody who's walking as if they have no maturity or a lack of maturity, because entitlement feels as if you want special treatment. And that goes back to the perspective of someone who's walking in with a lack of maturity, because they only see their own perspective. And because you want special treatment, you want things to go your way. When you make a mistake, ideally, everybody will want somebody to ignore their fault, ignore the fact that they made a mistake, but you made a mistake. And a way to deal with that supporting factor, pride and entitlement, is by way of feeling through it. The moment you try to ignore the fact that you made a mistake, or fault is the moment that you draw a line of tolerance with whatever emotion that is tied with that given situation or circumstance. But the moment you do your best to feel through it, you understand how to take charge over the thoughts that try to come in because of those emotions. And now you have your own conscious thought. And because you have your own conscious thought, now you say things that you truly mean. You do things that you truly mean to do. And all those things compound to the point where now you are growing as a person. You are growing when it comes to interacting with people, when it comes to having life experiences. And that's, like we said earlier, that's where you grow in maturity. You set the boundary of pressure you can withstand. You set the boundary of emotional pressure you can withstand when it comes to your emotions. You need to grow in maturity. You need to grow callous when it comes to feeling through situations and not be numb to it. And being numb to it is what we talked about within pride and entitlement. That's falling in this line of being numb to it and having calluses. You built some sort of resistance to the effect of what emotion you are dealing with in a given situation or a given circumstance. What does that mean? It means you are not subjected to whatever that emotion you are feeling in a given situation or circumstance is trying to make you do, is trying to make you say, is trying to make you think. Because sometimes if you can't control your emotion, it causes you to think and it causes you to influence you in these types of ways. But numbness is a complete opposite to this. You are ignorant to the effects of the emotions you are feeling, and it causes you to be influenced by these emotions. It causes you to be influenced by these feelings. And now you're just doing and saying and thinking things off of instincts, but not instincts within your heart or within your own moral makeup, but within the makeup of your emotions. So we need to be mindful of our actions when it comes to, setting the boundary of initial pressure. When it comes to emotional pressure, so we have a high tolerance. Now we're not as triggered because going to the second foundation is what we talked about earlier when it comes to the core definition of emotional pressure. It's the external pressure caused by factors that we cannot control. This is something somebody said, this is something somebody did, or whatever the case may be that causes you to relive the emotion that you felt the moment you tried to ignore it or tried to throw out the window, similar examples that we gave previously within this topic. But the only way to deal with that, it's similar to everything we've been talking about. When it comes to external factors, you need to learn how to endure. You need to learn how to endure what words somebody is saying to you. You need to endure what somebody did to you where you felt or you took whatever it is they did personally. Try not to take things personally. And yeah, it's easier said than done, but try, man. Like at the end of the day, if God can endure what he did by choice, you can endure anything else externally by choice. It's as simple as that. It's not easy, but it's as simple as that. And you just need to be more mindful of all these things. And I get it. We as humans, we as believers in Christ are an emotional being, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we need to work on building our emotional limits to overcome those moments when the world or our environment or things externally try to stir up our emotions and cause us to flow into a triggered state. Because the moment we are triggered is the moment we are not in control of our lives. The moment we are walking outside of God's will for our lives is the moment you are walking outside of your destiny. And like we said on this podcast, double down on learning maturity. Double down on feeling through the situation. Read the Bible. Find a ministry that can teach you Jesus to help you teach the things that God already has in place for you to learn, to support all these things. At the end of the day, my name is Olivier J. Darcis, helping you do to do life well and do it with God. Peace.